Hello and welcome to another episode of the GCSUNScast, the longest running Gold Coast Suns show on the interwebs. I'm your host Shane, and the show is brought to you by our Patreon sponsors, Dale Snelling, Paul Vosti, Robbie Fiorini, Brody Burgess, Tom Kim and Tim. Thank you all for supporting the show, and to join me to talk about the Suns today, one of our Patreon sponsors, Paul Vosti. Welcome back to the show, Paul. It's good to have you on.
Thanks, Shane. Looking forward to it, and it's been a good 3 weeks for the Suns. They've certainly stopped the Melbourne media and all the critics down south of 3 or 4 weeks ago when they were getting stuck into the club. So it's been really promising the last 3 weeks. Yeah,
it's amazing how quickly things can change. They say a week is a long time in footy. A month feels like bloody years. And the Gold Coast Suns' last month of football has been sensational. The 2 wins against Richmond that no one expected. They grinded out a fantastic win against the Giants, which again, no one gave us credit for. And now to come up against the Western Bulldogs, a side that beat us by just over 10 goals less than 6 months ago. And now it was an 11-point loss, but a very solid and brave loss to the Gold Coast Suns. 11 goals, 13-79. The Dogs 14-6-90. And it could have been an even closer margin if it wasn't for a few dubious umpire calls that went against us. We don't like to focus on the umpires on this show, but we got to say there was a couple of things that just didn't sit quite right with us. Probably the most obvious one was that ARC score review. We were just talking about it off air, Paul. It was an atrocious decision to not get right, was it?
Yeah, well, as a footy supporter, you question when people are in paid positions that the guy that's sitting in the ARC, if we can all see it, if everyone can see it, Jared Healy can see it, the commentators can see it, that he doesn't have the power to actually call that decision and say, goal umpire, you got it wrong, because it was a foot over the line. So, and like we were saying off air, when you're playing these top sides, it does come down to a few little moments that you just need a bit of luck on your side. And even your reference to the Bulldogs, the first time around we played them, I was watching with Wayne. We went to the game live down at Marvel, and everything went right for the Bulldogs that first half. Treloar kicked a goal from 80. They had a couple bounce through that did Shane Warne leg breaks, and it was just like, oh my God, we can't take a trick here. And at the same thing on the weekend, there was just a few little decision making issues late in quarters. Young Will Powell, who's having a terrific season, just sort of panicked with 30 seconds to go and lost possession when he could have released to another player. And, Bulldogs kick a goal on the siren, with 2 seconds to go. So it's just those little things that, this young group have just got to tidy up that will change these great, losses that we're proud of, because we go and support them and we love the way they're playing at the moment, but those will turn into wins against the better opposition.
Yeah, and another one there, that Chris Burgess holding the ball, which directly resulted in a Dogs goal. That was a bit stiff as well from my eyes. But back to the ARC, Jared Healy summed it up pretty much spot on the couch last night, that the ARC review is limited with what it can do. It doesn't have the power to directly overrule an umpire unless there's conclusive evidence. So either the ability to gain that evidence, the video footage, the cameras, all that sort of technology either needs to be a lot better, or as Jared Healy put it, they probably need to lower the level of proof they need to overturn something like that, because we all thought it was pretty much a go, everyone in the crowd, and there was a lot of boos that came around as soon as that was called behind. So yeah, it's something that certainly needs to be worked on. The Suns were unlucky with that. and they probably could have been even closer than that 11 points if a few other things went their way. Multiple goal scorers for the Suns. Nick Coleman, Alex Sexton and Ben Ainsworth each had 3 apiece, and Ben King managed to kick 2 goals. The only negative I would have with that is that they were our only goal scorers for the game. 4 goal scorers for a game of football is not enough to win you games of football. And that's one area that the footy club needs to get better at, is finding other avenues to goal, mainly from our midfielders, because as you can see from that list, it was all our forwards, and not even the key forwards besides King. It was the mid to small forwards that really stepped up and had an impact. Ben Ainsworth, he's been sensational since he came back from his stint in the VFL side, and he bobbed up early and really got the Suns off to a good start, didn't he?
Yeah, and I think like with Ben and Braden Farini, like that's the evolution of this list and the depth that's being created within the club, especially in the medium size, small forwards, half backs, midfield roles. That there's depth in all those positions now. So they're actually, when they're going back to find some form. And knowing Ben quite well, he's a very determined young man, and he didn't want to stay down there long. So, they're going down with purpose. And whereas, a couple of years ago, the club probably wasn't in the position to even drop players. People were getting gifted games, and there was no sort of purpose of dropping them because we didn't have good enough talent in the VFL side to come up and create pressure for spots. So, apart from the key, the tall backs and forwards and the ruck position, all the other positions across the ground have got a lot of depth in the reserves at the moment.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of depth, and we'll need some of that this weekend. We've had the injury list break. It looks like Weller and Markov are a test, but from what we've been discussing, it sounds like that they're probably going to take the cautionary route with Weller. It's his second concussion for the season, and we all know that concussions are a really important issue in the AFL, and they're probably... Well, I would hope they would look after Weller's best interests, and if that means him sitting out for the rest of the season or taking a delayed return, that would be the best thing for him and for the football club. Sam Day is listed as 1 to 2 weeks. He's got a foot injury. Brandon Ellis, who pinged his hamstring in the first quarter of that game, is out for 3 weeks. And Holman, the star of the first quarter for the Gold Coast Suns, has injured his abdomen, according to the Gold Coast Suns site, and he's listed as TBC. Now, I could probably pinpoint the exact moment that he might have hurt his abdomen in that game, because he got a crunching tackle after he kicked a beautiful goal, and he seemed a bit sore trying to get up, but I think he played out the game. So if that was the case, that was very courageous of Nick Coleman, and that's sort of what we've come to expect from him.
Yeah, it's not the first game that he's played out with what's been post game of significant injury. He certainly can handle pain, and even he has issues with his back as well, just from a management perspective between games. So I know that's why he's one of Stewie's favourite, because he certainly is prepared to give everything he can for the club and his teammates.
Well, let's discuss some of the other performers from this game. Tuke Miller doing what he's been doing all year, 38 disposals at 73% efficiency, 17 contested and 8 clearances. Braden Fiorini having his best game since he's come back, 32 disposals at 75% efficiency, 13 contested and 6 clearances. And Rising Star nominee Jeremy Sharp, 30 disposals, 518 metres gained and 10 marks. That's a great performance from the bloke playing only his 6th game of AFL footy.
Yeah, and, again, watching it live, it's funny how when you go watch the footy live compared to TV, you can get a different perspective. Like the TV can show some things better, but live can show other things better. And one thing with Toot is, I was talking to some guys at the footy about his ability to push back and help defence from clearance is just elite. He, literally was a centre bounce and there he is and he's getting a handball in the back pocket and his work rate is, is going to really pull this group through. And you can see that with young Jeremy Sharp. He's got a massive engine as well and he's, when you watch him live, how much ground coverage and he's running on top of the ground late in the game as well. And I think that's also, it's been helpful that we've been able to hold, even though he got a few games late last year, we've been able to hold this kid back and make him earn his spot and make him learn all the right ways. And now he's come back into the AFL system and he's hungry, but his body's ready, he's fit enough, and he's come back and he's making a great impact. And I'm sure he'd be spending countless hours with Alice and having him as a role model and seeing how hard Braden trains and works as a wingman. So, these kids now are, got genuine people to look at the club and say, oh, if I want to be an A-grade AFL player, this is how I have to work. And it's showing and it's great. It's great for Braden Farini to, he's done it hard, and I'm sure he's had periods of time in the last 6 months where he's probably been thinking about his future at the Gold Coast Suns, but he loves the club and he loves living on the Gold Coast, and they've got a young family and he's been in the leadership group and he hasn't chucked in the towel, and now he's come back and he's making a significant impact at AFL level again.
Yeah, do you think he's got the backing of the club to stick around, and can he continue this current form, or I guess can he make the position that was vacated by Hugh Greenwood's injury? Can he make that his own now? Look, clearly now they're not gifting any games, so they're picking best side at all times, and there's going to be like Darcy McPherson was third in the best and fairest 2 years ago, and is in and out of the side. So there's players there that are on the fringe, ready to pounce if a position if a position opens up in their area of the ground. But look, I'd like to see that as we head towards the 2022 to 2024 window where, we must contend for finals and we, have to put together a list that not only can contend but can, be a genuine threat, that, the huge Greenwood's roles then change again and, Hugh might end up being more of the role that he played at Adelaide where he was, a forward with a little bit of midfield minutes. But, that's not for me to say how it will unfold. But I see, like even Dave Swallow might end up reinventing himself off a back flank. He played some little, some time off half back on the weekend and he was very good. So there's going to be, that'll be in Braden's hands to how well he can play. But he's certainly an AFL player. If he's not at the Suns, he'll be able to play AFL football somewhere else because he's proven it when he gets his opportunity. Mm. Well, a couple of other players that are making the most of their opportunity. The three concession players, mature age players that we got handed by the AFL a few years back, Corbett, Burgess and Collins are all having a huge impact for the Suns. Corbett was fantastic again on the weekend. His contested marks is really something which really helps the Suns out and sets up as a link man going forward. Collins is as solid as ever in defence, keeping defenders goalless in most situations. I think his opponent, Josh Bruce, only had the one goal on the weekend, if that.
Yep.
And the other player, Chris Burgess, he's been fantastic since he's had to take on the role as the primary ruckman in the side. I felt he broke even with English in the hitouts. And that's shown with the hit-outs to advantage. I think English only had 12 and Burgess had 11. So to match someone like English with hit-outs to advantage is really impressive. And he also did his bit around the ground as well, I thought.
They've look, they nailed those 3 picks. They've not only have proven to be good footballers, but they're good people. And you can just see, with Collins being out injured so much, how much of that impact that had on Charlie Ballard's season in the early middle stages. And then as soon as Sam's come back and freed up Charlie, and also the directional talk he gives Charlie on the ground, Ballard's last month has been outstanding. But, he was in a little bit of a patch where he was probably, again, having to wear shoes that were too big for him because, he's just a kid, and we had no Rory Thompson, no Sam Collins, and Caleb Graham's a kid, has played 15 games as well. So all of a sudden Charlie's the number one defender and he's played 50 games of footy. So, how good will Sam Collins be next year with a uninterrupted pre-season and Rory Thompson coming back into the side? How good will Charlie Ballard be with Rory Thompson and Sam Collins in that back six?
Yeah, getting the continuity, getting Thompson back and having an injury-free pre-season and hit at it certainly makes that defensive side suddenly look very imposing to opposition forwards. A couple of players that also had great games. We already discussed Holman having a huge impact, but Sexton as well. He led the entire team, the Bulldogs, everyone with the forward 50 ground ball gets. Not a stat we hear too often, but he was front and centre for contests, marking contests, and he really reaped the rewards. He had 6 forward 50 ground ball gets. The highest any Bulldogs player got on that night was 2. Nick Holman had 3 as well. So those 2 were really setting the stage for the mid and the small forwards. And it seems like our forward line's finally starting to click. So that's really impressive.
No, that was his best game for the year for sure. He's had an up and down season as well this year after probably being our number one forward for the last couple of years. So, it was good to see him find some form on the weekend. He was lively, exciting. I think he kicked 3 goals, 4, and had a hand in a couple others. So, that's all you can expect from a half forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We discussed Collins and Ballard just before, but another person I want to mention, Caleb Graham. Now, I've been critical of him on this show before. He had a really good game, I thought, without being too impactful, but he led the way for the Suns with spoils. He had 11 spoils, Collins had 10, and Ballard had 9. So despite Caleb Graham seemingly like he was out of the play, he certainly did his bit in quelling the Bulldogs forwards. And I think he may just turn out to be an AFL quality fullback if given the time to develop.
Yeah, and we were talking about him off air as well, is that I'm sure internally the club would have thought they might have only got 1 or 2 games into Caleb in the first couple of years of his development. If it wasn't for the injuries that have occurred with Witts and Thompson, he probably would have spent the lion's share of the season in the VFL at fullback learning his craft. So they're getting games into him they didn't expect to get, and he's proving to be quite versatile. He pinch hits in the ruck. He has played forward and back, and he's still got a bit of a issue with his kicking, but he's got great hands. He can take a mark. So I think I think they'd be very pleased with where he's at for where they thought he'd be at this time.
Yeah, it's still, like you said, his kicking's still an issue and very nerve-wracking when they start doing chipping around in the back line. And Caleb Graham's part of that group of blokes touching the ball. Moving on, what didn't work? Well, I felt like the tackles could have been better. Miller and Fiorini led the way with 7 and 6, but in the past we've seen higher numbers than that. Not having Hugh Greenwood is obviously going to impact that as well, but someone needed to stand up and try to lay a few more tackles. Bontempelli for the Dogs, McRae for the Dogs, they were all over the place and they had every opportunity to be tackled, but they were all too strong, and the amount of fend-offs I saw was a bit concerning that they were able to just push some of our players aside so easily.
Yeah, look, Bontempelli's a pretty special player. A couple of times it's in that second quarter where, we were starting, we had ascendancy and he just basically grabbed hold of that game. There was a couple of times he looked like a monster. But saying that, Bulldogs also do play a quick brand of uncontested footy, which leads to less tackling. Like they do chip the ball around and move it quickly. So sometimes, you don't have as many tackling opportunities. But I do agree there were times where they looked like they did monster us, and not having Hugh Greenwood, that he would have stood up to Bontempelli. But again, we know the age profile, we know the game's profile. These things are going to happen. The big monsters are going to get hold of us at certain stages, but they're not going to get hold of us for much longer. And it's starting to already turn.
Yeah, it is. You've moved up recently from Melbourne, Paul. You're up here now on the Gold Coast. You were at the game on the weekend. How did the atmosphere vibe with you? Obviously, you were enjoying yourself, having a few drinks. Did you hear much from the crowd? There's been a lot of discussions over the last few weeks about how good how loudly the Vic Suns cheer. But what did you think of the noise the Gold Coast Suns fans made up here on the Gold Coast?
Yeah, look, it's good. And what's exciting is that, it's such a great stadium. And, I wasn't here in the Ablett era when, before he did his shoulder, and I think they got 20 or 22,000 people to the game then, when they were sort of probably having their most successful season. So from a visual thinking forward, I could just see that stadium with 20 to 25,000 people being a pretty intimidating place for opposition to play. Even going down to the fifth quarter after the function and listening to Dewey and Darcy McPherson and Jared Harbrow and a few of the boys spoke to the members that were down there. Like, they're very passionate, and they love wearing the Suns colours, and there's a lot of kids coming through that love the club. And the guy down in Melbourne, he used to be Sonny Ray, so he was the Melbourne mascot, and now he's got the drum, and he's a bit of a legend. He's creating a bit of a following for himself and getting a bit of exposure. So no, it's great, and all this packaged up with seeing more people supporting the club interstate. The media now getting, playing Richmond on main TV and beating the reigning premiers, and the momentum is all happening, and this is the thing. Momentum can work in two ways. It can be positive and negative, and like you said, with a week's a long week in footy, we're on this positive momentum now where we're getting media people enjoy what we're bringing to the table. So it's so important that we finish this season with the hard draw that way. So if we can finish, not wins and losses, if we can finish and play that brand of football against Brisbane, that brand of football against Melbourne, that brand of football against Carlton, against Essendon, against Sydney, we win one or two games, great. But if we can just bring that energy and Gold Coast brand, then where you'll lead to a bit later about upcoming the draft, then the player managers will be ringing Craig Cameron. They'll be saying, our player likes what he sees. But if we were to continue the way they were, and have that bad 3 weeks, and that bad 3 weeks become a bad 10 weeks, well, then that momentum has gone the other way, and the Melbourne media are, basically eating the club, and, the president has to stand up for the club instead of, being a president. So I think, long story short, I think it was fantastic on the weekend. I think the momentum and the supporters, it's just growing all the time, and the atmosphere is terrific.
Yeah, the supporters are definitely growing all the time. I noticed on the weekend that they'd sort of dialed back a bit with the music that blares after goals at the game, and that's had a bit of an impact, allowing members to be a bit more vocal and be heard when they're cheering their sons on. As you said just then, with the drawing a blank, oh my God, this is embarrassing.
Momentum.
Yeah, the momentum at the end of the season, it's so, that's an understatement. It's so incredibly important that the Gold Coast Suns continue this form throughout the rest of the season, because, like you said, that sets up next year, that sets up the confidence that they have to play this brand of football and match up against no matter who they come across next season. But also, as far as attracting people to the club, it sets a real precedent for their preseason training and lifts those levels as well. It's so
membership. People just buy next year's membership because they see the future.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
It's so powerful.
I mean, from the last 11 years, the hope as a Sun supporter has really come in the off season, the trade and the draft period, and seeing who we're going to get. But it doesn't usually last this long into the season. By this stage, we're usually tired, we're usually worn out. The Suns are really digging in and having a crack this year, and it's really impressive. I think every Sun supporter is on board, even if we lose games. The fact that they're in these games right up to the last couple of minutes of each game is really impressive. Sneaking the odd win here or there is really important. They can have a huge impact on the finals results if they keep playing like this. I mean, we play Brisbane this week up at the Gabba. Next week looks like it will be Melbourne somewhere as well. That could stop these two sides from having a home final in the first week of finals if they get beat by the Suns. It's really important that they continue this and they carry this further. Okay, let's jump over to a new section that we're going to introduce for the rest of this season, Trade Talk. So rumours are starting to pop up every week about players the club might be interested in or who they're chasing, and this is where we will dissect all that and discuss what sort of players the club should actually be chasing. So let me ask you this, Paul. What positions do you think the Gold Coast Suns need to fill in the off-season?
I think nearly, if you did a straw poll, I reckon 99% of people will say the same thing. We need to a second ruck forward to back up when Witsy comes back. A key forward and a key back. I think the midfield, the small to mid-sized half forwards, the wings, and the back 7 or 8 are all. We've got plenty of depth in those areas, and we've got young talent coming through in the VFL with Eliza Hollands, Joel Jeffrey, Davies, McPherson, those type of guys. All playing those mid-sized roles as well. So I think we've got a lot of talent in that area. So emerging talent, but yeah, the tall timber. I waffle on sometimes, but what Ben King's doing as a third-year player in a key position at the moment is amazing. You look at his brother, and his brother's got the support he's got in the forward line at St Kilda compared to what Ben's got in terms of tools. He's won out. He's been won out basically his whole career. So he's doing a stellar job. So if we can find support Sam Day's been good as well, but, he's getting to the stage, he's 29 or 30. So, that premiership window, the clock that we talk about, Sam could be, 32 when we're coming up to that period of time where we're going to be genuinely in the hunt.
Okay, so tall defender, tall forward, they're the sort of players that we're looking for. The players we've been linked to so far this off-season, the latest one is Rory Lobb over at Fremantle. We were discussing this off-air, that he's averaging about a goal and a half a game. He's a ruck forward, apparently on the big dollars as well, but is entertaining options to go to another club. What are your thoughts on Rory Lobb?
To be honest, he reminds me of Kurt Tippett and Tyrone Vickery. They're the two that pop into mind that have these games spasmodically throughout their careers that they just jump off the page like he did a couple of weeks ago, contested marks, kicked 5 goals, and you go, wow, Rory Lobb, Kurt Tippett, Tyrone Vickery. But over the course of a season, they don't give you enough. I'd be putting. I personally, if you got him for the right price, the right terms, 3 to 4 years at the right dollars, and he wanted to come here, of course you wouldn't say no, we're not going to entertain it. But if he's after the superannuation contract, I wouldn't be. He wouldn't be at the top of my list.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The what's being reported is that his partner's looking at jobs in Melbourne. So for starters, I don't get how that relates to the Gold Coast. But also, I
think she works for VRC Racing, so the Victorian Racing Club. So, or her ex boss has got a connection there. So, I'm not sure how that leads to Gold Coast unless she's going to get a role at the Magic Millions.
Yeah, so it's one of those ones that I'm not sure about. I don't think is a good decision for the club, and I'd say for the first time in my life, I'd have to agree with Matty Lloyd on what he said today about the Suns shouldn't go there. It would be a bad decision, and they shouldn't be opening their checkbook. They're sort of past that stage, and they need to focus on developing players and bringing in players that will complement those players. So that would be a no for Lobb for me as well. Daniel Talia from Adelaide, a key defender. What are your thoughts on him?
Look, was he a 2 or 3 time All-Australian? He's had a great career, but I'd have to check his age. I'd say he's probably 31 or 32. Just don't think he fits the profile. Like, I think, again, we spoke earlier about Collins, Corbett and Burgess. You get them, their age profile. So it's no point making a desperate decision to say, we've got to get someone that's 6'5", but he's only got 1 year left in him. You're probably better off just getting more games into Caleb Graham. I think our age profile of who they've got to chase has got to be 25 to 27, so that you've got between 5 and 6 years we're going to get out of this guy, and they're coming into their best parts of their footy to line up with where this football club's headed. This football club's headed, let's say we're at, I don't know, maybe 9 o'clock on the premiership clock, and your premiership clock starts at 11. Maybe we're at 8 o'clock, 8 or 9 o'clock, but we're certainly not at 3 or 4 now, so we're moving towards that period of time. So you have to look at these players that are going to be there when we think we're going to be there.
Yeah,
to contend.
You've got a really good point, and a lot of fans, I feel, probably over forget this stat, but we really do have to look at where the list build of our team is. We're probably looking at playing finals realistically in 2022 to 2024, sometime between then.
Yep.
So we're looking at players that are going to fit into that age group, be around throughout that period of time. So we're looking at people immediately under the age of 28, and then on top of that, you probably want a little bit of sustained success as well and room to grow. So you'd be looking at people in around that age group of 26 or so to not just have an immediate impact at the football club, but be able to complement and help develop the talent that we've already got on the list. We were talking off air about how much talent the Suns actually has in that midfield already. Alex Davies, Elijah Hollands, Lockie Weller isn't currently playing. We've got Brandon Ellis, who just missed the last game with injury. There are so many players that the Suns have on that list that can run through that midfield and have an impact. They just need to get a chance to develop. Will Brody's another one. So that they certainly have the talent on their list, and it's probably now time that we need to get mature bodies around them that can complement them and grow with them, not just be here for a year or two as a stopgap. So
yeah, like with Talia, if Talia, for example, wanted out of Adelaide and there was a Jordan Lewis, a Luke Hodge role type of role where he played for 1 to 2 years with a coaching role moving forward, well, you'd entertain that. But what I'm saying is, I don't want to see the club make a desperate move to hand out a big superannuation check to someone and give a contract that's too long and too big for where they really stand in the game. So, we've got to re-sign King, Lukosius, Rankin. Flanders re-signed this week, which was terrific. But, there's Rao, Anderson. There's going to be, some big signings that need to happen in the next 12 to 24 months. So you've got to be careful of how you spend your money as well.
Yeah. So if we look ahead at the list of names I've got in front of us, scratching off all those blokes that would probably be too old, we're looking at players like Callum Coleman-Jones or Mabior Chol, who the Suns were linked to several weeks ago. They've both had standout games, and they've both had some pretty quiet games as well playing for Richmond this year. Do you think that these are targets that would better suit the Suns? Callum Coleman-Jones as that key forward that can ruck. Mabior Chol also plays a similar position.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the one down at Geelong, Radaglia, maybe a fresh start. But, you can see what's happened to the small guy up at Brisbane from Geelong that basically hasn't missed a game, Lockie Weller's best mate.
Lincoln
a fresh start. Yeah. Sometimes a fresh start can change a footballer. So the trouble with the two Richmond boys is that how are you going to get them out of there? Hardwick's going to be sitting down with them saying, right, Jack's got 1 year left in him, 2 at the best. You're our next Jack Rewalt. It was like Noah Bolter. I thought he would have been a terrific get for the Gold Coast Suns, but, they signed him up for 4 or 5 years. So if you could get one of those 2 out of Richmond, I'd certainly give it the big green tick, because I think they've both got enough upside. Their age is right. They're being taught by the best. They're training with the best. They're getting great habits, and they want, and they'll come up here, and I'd be pretty hopeful they'd make an impact at the Suns, because in that position we don't have a lot of depth.
Yeah, so I think it's certainly gettable getting one of those blokes out of Richmond. Mabior Chol, for instance, he's an unrestricted free agent. We don't have to trade with Richmond to get him. We basically just have to convince him to come up here to the Suns. So that could be a dollar value that we might need chase to get him up here. He is I won't say he's a Queenslander. I don't know exactly where his origin is, but he has grown up in Queensland, so it would almost be a homecoming for Mabior. Coleman Jones is probably the one that would cost a bit to get out of Richmond. He's incredibly valued down there. They really rate him. He was a first-round pick a few years back, and he's the player that they view as their next key forward to replace Tom Lynch and Jack Riewoldt. So he's the player that we'd have to give up a bit for. I also think he's probably got the highest potential. So someone like Coleman Jones, if the Suns were able to get him, I certainly feel they've got the draft capital and the finances to convince him to come up here. It's just a matter of getting in his ear and convincing him that he can immediately have an impact up at the Gold Coast Suns, be a number 1 or number 2 banana next to Ben King, and really enjoy his footy up here in the sun. So that's what the Suns need to do.
What about Sam Wiedemann?
Sam Wiedemann's another one that I sort of haven't given Sam Wiedemann too much attention, because I do feel like he is a player that we just don't have any chance of getting. But if to say that we could get him, I'd be all over that. He's probably the best option out of all the players that we've discussed. He would probably cost a bit more, but his potential and his talent is undeniable, and he could probably even overtake Ben King as the key forward up here at the Gold Coast Suns.
It's a big call.
Yeah, it is.
But it'll be interesting to see what top offers are thrown around for him, because I'd say Collingwood will go in pretty hard for Wiedemann, and but yeah, it's but you can see, like, even what's happened with Port Adelaide with Aliir. So if you can pry one of these guys out and they get a second chance and they get to play consistent footy, there might be a diamond there that we can find. But I'm sure Craig Cameron and the list management team would be throwing their hat into the ring at anyone that they think's in that age profile of a key position, flexible, good person, and especially if they're coming from one of the better clubs that have got good systems and good programs. I know they like to recruit from the Richmonds and the Geelongs and the clubs that have had success. Then getting players out of North Melbourne or clubs that have been more down the bottom. So, yeah, interesting. It's going to be an interesting trade this year, because we definitely probably for the first time in 5 or 6 years aren't going to be focusing on putting all our marbles on the young high level talent. I think they're definitely going to be looking at strategic players to round out the list that they're already happy with.
All right, thanks for joining me tonight, Paul. That's all the time we have for tonight. Hopefully we'll have you on the show again soon, but until then, go Suns.
Thanks, Shane. See ya.